Good morning, everyone, and or good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this particular session of NATA preparation for 2022. It's a very interesting session we have. We have Professor Anantha Krishna, who's one of the top professors in India, very well recognized in India um, for architecture education. And he's got a very good history, and I'll let Dr. Gayatri talk about that. But I would also like to introduce to you Dr. Gayatri, who's representing NITTE School of Architecture, Planning and Design. Good afternoon, Dr. Gayatri. How are you doing? You're on mute.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for co-hosting this. So just so that everyone knows, this particular series of 3 workshops is hosted by DQ Labs and NITTE School of Architecture, Planning and Design. So NITTE School is one of it's a 4-year-old school right now, and 3-year-old school.
6.
All right. But is one of the most promising architecture schools that we have seen in Bangalore. They're very progressive, and they've done wonders in the short frame of time that they've been around. So I'd let Dr. Gayatri talk about NITTE School for a bit till Dr. Anantha Krishna comes in. Yeah.
Firstly, I would like to welcome all the students, and congratulations to you all for choosing a very distinct and a very promising career field, architecture and planning. So on behalf of the hosting institution, NITTE School of Architecture, Planning and Design, and I take the pleasure to introduce the college as well as our speaker for the day. And NITTE, as Dion was mentioning, we are incepted in the year 2016-17. We offer 2 courses, BR, a 5-year degree program, and also a B-Plan program, which is bachelor's, first of its kind in Karnataka. So we are the first ones to start under VTU, Visvesvaraya Technological University. And we are recognized by AICTE and ITPI, COA, Council of Architects in Delhi, and AICTE. And we are approved by Government of Karnataka. Coming to our speaker today, Dr. K.S. Anantha Krishna. He is a professor emeritus with NITTE School of Architecture, and he, I would say personally, as father of history. Okay, so he teaches, even today teachers wait to listen to his lectures. So he's considered to be one of the most distinguished scholars of architecture, not only in India, but across the world. His leadership in this area is highly recognized and respected. He headed the Department of Architecture, MIT, Manipal for 6 years, and founded the Department of Architecture, RVCE, in 1992. Today, everybody recognizes and they associate his name with RV College of Architecture. And academic visionary, hardcore teacher and researcher. He is a recipient of IIA Madhav Achwal Gold Medal in 2014 for lifetime contribution to the field of architecture education and community service. He has served academic senate member as 6 years and chairman of BOS for architecture under VTU for 15 years in Belgaum. He has recently served as jury member for the Global Architectural Competition for Indian National War Museum, New Delhi, on behalf of Ministry of Defense, Government of India. So welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, madam. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor, for coming in. Umesh, would you like to take it further from here?
Right. All right. So welcome, Professor Anantha Krishna, and thank you, Professor Gayatri, and thanks, Dion, for the introduction. So, so all the students who are appearing for the NATA entrance exam and JEE paper 2, in fact, today they are announcing the the first attempt result. Probably they'll be announcing it shortly. But you have given the exam, so you have first-hand experience, and some of you have not yet given the exam. So for those who have not given the exam, we have put up the paper online on DQH, edge.dqlabs.in. So we recommend you to go and take the test personally so that you get to know what kind of questions are being asked. If you observe the kind of questions that they're asking in the exam, especially the architecture related part, okay, in 2021, they have heavily focused on identifying the buildings from various views like sectional view, plan view, and also they have asked questions on identifying the elements, important elements of a building. All right. So unless an aspirant knows detailed information about that, it is very difficult to answer. And most of these questions are multiple select kind of a questions, which means that one will have to have a deeper understanding of the built environment to answer all the correct options. Okay, if you don't choose the correct options, then you would obviously lose the entire marks. So in that context, we thought it would be beneficial for all the aspirants to have a good understanding of the most important buildings of history, right? So in that context, we have requested Professor Anantha Krishna through Dr. Gayatri to help all of us to understand what those 50 buildings are and what are the various elements which are relevant and important and make those buildings very significant. All right. So please keep a notes of all these, and I would want you to research these buildings and the terms and technologies, whatever terms being discussed by Dr. Anantha Krishna. Google them and develop thorough understanding of them at a later point. Okay, but for now, hear attentively, take down notes, and I'm sure as architecture aspirants, we all will be very much enthused to see the fantastic buildings of the history, and really looking forward for the session by Dr. Anantha Krishna. So without any delay, sir, may I request you to kindly start the presentation?
So here, just a quick, we have taken 50 buildings, and he will cover these 50 buildings in the 3 sessions.
Yes. I'm sorry to tell that. So yes, so the first session is happening today. The second and third session will happen on next 2 Mondays. So same time, 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. All right. Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay.
Over to you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you very much, DQ Labs and Dr. Gayatri, Madam, both of whom have given this opportunity to speak to the NATA aspirants. First of all, I welcome all the NATA aspirants who are attending this session. As already mentioned by Dr. Gayatri, we have identified 50 very important buildings across the world. And let me say that out of that 50, there is a good number of buildings belonging to India for obvious reasons. And each building, on each building, there will be multiple choice questions. And there will be 8 answers. And out of these 8 answers, 4 will be correct. And as per the instruction, I have seen only if all the 4 answers are correct, the student will be awarded the mark. So what we plan to do is to cover these 50 buildings in 3 sessions, as already mentioned. So per session, it will be around 16 to 17 buildings. And before I start, let me say that, as already said very rightly by the DQ labs, when we want to answer these questions, there has to be some broader understanding of the building. Without that, if the questions, if they are tweaked a little bit, it will become very difficult to answer. As very appropriately advised already, after this session, it is better for the students to Google and get a broader hang of the building. Nevertheless, the plan I'm going to adopt is that the 8 answers that have been prepared for each question, there will be only 4 answers which are correct. So I would like to go through each of the answers. If the answer is correct, I will give you the reason why it is correct. And if the answer is wrong, I would again like to give the reason why it is wrong. So if I discuss this much, please appreciate we can discuss much more. The history of architecture is an ocean. But that is not the purpose of this very limited intent that we have in this session. Therefore, I would like to follow this approach and cover about 17 buildings per session. So let me start with the first building. And all this, the arrangement of the buildings is not in any particular order, because we do not know what kind of a order the actual exam would follow. So therefore, one must be able to look at the buildings in a rather random manner and not expect any particular sequencing. As I have already mentioned, the buildings belong to India and also to the rest of the world. So I have not grouped the buildings as Indian and let us say by country. I thought that was not appropriate. Let me start with the first building. Now, when you look at this building, you can please follow the question. The following is a view of is a reconstructed picture of the famous Acropolis of the city of Athens, Greece. And all of you, at least some of you must be aware, Athens is a very ancient city. And today, the monuments over there, they're all in a ruined state. And of course, it is a preserved monument, no doubt. So what you see here is the reconstructed picture of the famous Acropolis. And from this picture, you have to identify 4 architectural elements. And as I have already said, marks will be given only if all the 4 answers are correct. There are 8 answers. Let us look at them and understand what is correct, why it is correct. First of all, we should have some understanding of Acropolis. Acropolis is the most important part of the ancient Greek city. So Acropolis consisted of the most important buildings in the city of Athens. And because they were most important buildings, they were all located on in an elevated place for the main purpose of security. All of you will agree that if you want more security, the elevation will matter a lot, especially in the ancient days. The technology was very different. So elevated place means more security. You find that all across the world. For example, you take Jain temples, they're all located on the top of hillocks for better security. Same thing over here. Acropolis, therefore, was the most important part of a Greek city, ancient Greek city. You can say classical Greek city. And you have a variety of buildings here. The most important building, of course, you may be familiar, it is called the Parthenon. You can see that temple, the most famous Greek temple, Parthenon. You can see that occupying a very important location inside the Acropolis. But apart from that, there are other temples, the treasury, and the formal entry point into this Acropolis, which is called Propyle. Let us not get too much into the technicalities because you are still new entrants into the field. Now, with this brief introduction, and you can see also here the defensive wall all around. Please understand that it is in an elevated place, and you can see a lot of boulders also, rocky formations. And please appreciate rocky formations and good defense, they go together. Now let us now look at all the 8 answers and see what is right, what is wrong. The question is, you identify 4 architectural elements. A. And I request all of you to kindly note the name of the building and also these 8 answers given, and please tick mark which are the right answers, and if possible, please make a note why it is wrong, why it is right. So there will be later on, there will be a lot of clarity in your mind, which will help you. First of all, elevated plane. Elevated plane, as I already mentioned, there is the city, which consists of different components, residential areas, marketplace, etc. But because the Acropolis contained the most important buildings, it was located in an elevated plane. So elevated plane is a correct answer, because in relation to the rest of the city, the Acropolis is elevated. You may wonder, plane means we normally think a plane is a flat surface. So you can consider this as more or less flat in a very generic manner compared to the rest of the city, which is at a lower level. So Acropolis is located in an elevated plane. See, all these buildings, they are on this plane. So elevated plane is a correct answer, number 1. B is boulders. You can see those boulders in the visual. Please understand, boulders are natural elements. There is no man-made, it is not a man-made element. So obviously the boulders were already existing, and because of that only, because of that the site was selected for the Acropolis. It is not an architectural element, it is a naturally existing element. So therefore it is not a right answer. C is treasury. Please understand that treasury means where in those days. See, treasury today has a different meaning. We talk about money, and all that. There was no such concept in those days. The wealth was decided based mostly on the ornaments, gold, valuables. So all the offerings that were given to the temple, they had to be protected. So treasury was an important component of the Acropolis. But nevertheless, please appreciate the point. Treasury is a building type, just like a temple. A temple is also a building type. So what the question expects is the identification of the architectural element. We should distinguish between architectural element and building typology. You can, a temple is a building typology. Art gallery is a building typology. You find art gallery also here. So what is being asked is not the building type, but it is architectural element. Therefore, treasury is not an architectural element. It is a building type. So that is not the right answer. Then D is pediment. Pediment is a term that is very much used in ancient architecture, especially in the European architecture, classical Greek and Roman architecture. Pediment refers to If you look at, if you can please focus your attention on the Parthenon, you can see right in front of the Parthenon, there is a pediment, and please appreciate it has got a sloping roof. So when you have got a sloping roof, the plan is actually a rectangle, as you can see. There are two sides, the shorter side for the rectangle and the longer side. And please appreciate, along the shorter side, the triangular pediment at the top, okay, which corresponds to the slope of the roof. That is called the pediment. So pediment is a triangular part at the top of the building, which corresponds to the sloping roof behind it. So pediment is an architectural element, and therefore that is a right answer. Obviously, I have already given you the hint. If you take E, temples is not one of the right answers, simply because it is another building typology and it is not. So that in the visual, you can kindly see that the pediment has been highlighted, a triangular part at the top. The pediment, below the pediment, of course, you have got the horizontal element, we call it the entablature. And then below the entablature, or if you want a simple terminology, lintel, horizontal beam if you want, even simpler than that. And below that, you can see the columns. We call it colonnade. The row of columns is called colonnade. The columns are all supporting the lintel or the entablature. So you can see the transfer of weight from the pediment to the entablature, from the entablature to the row of columns or colonnade, and below that, of course, you have got the steps. Therefore, pediment is a correct answer. Temples is a wrong answer. Colonnade, just now I explained, it is a right answer, simply because the colonnade is a very important component. It is an element. The colonnade helps to support the load that comes from the top, from the roof. So you can see the row of columns, colonnade is a right answer. And finally, you have got the zigzag wall. Zigzag wall, so you can please see the highlighting of the colonnade on both the sides, right in the front and also in the sides. You have got the colonnades on two sides, of course. Colonnade is there on all the four sides. What you are seeing now is only two sides, but with a very clear understanding what is a colonnade. It is a row of columns which are used for supporting the load that comes from the top, from the roof mainly. So you understand what is a colonnade. Colonnade is a correct answer. It is an architectural element. And finally, zigzag wall. So let me just recapitulate. We have identified already elevated plane, correct answer. Boulders, not correct. Treasury, not correct. Pediment is correct. Temples, not correct. Colonnade is correct. So you can easily guess that zigzag wall has to be a correct answer. Zigzag wall, you can see that is what is giving the protection to the Acropolis. And it is zigzag and not straight, because you can see this boulders and undulating steep slope all around. This is in an elevated place. So all around there is a steep slope downwards, and you got all those boulders. So obviously, when you construct a wall for defense, the wall cannot be a straight line. It has to be a zigzag because of the undulations or the steep slope that is happening on all the sides. To follow the contour or to follow the profile of the earth below, the wall has to be zigzag. So you have got a zigzag wall all around for the purpose of protection. And in those days, this wall, defensive wall, was the main means of protection from enemies. Whenever there was an invasion, the Acropolis would also serve another purpose. For your kind information, all the people, when they had no choice, other choice, when the city was invaded, they would come to the Acropolis and take shelter, because this is a place of last resort for the purpose of protecting themselves from the enemy, because in the entire city, this is the most protected path. So with that, I think we will go to the next slide. Now, this is again a very important building. See, just like this Acropolis is such an important component of the Greek city, and over that you got that Pantheon, the most famous Greek temple. You know, classical architecture, Roman architecture is also as important as Greek architecture, because both of them are classified as classical architecture. Classical means something which has a very high benchmark and which acts as a model for others. I will give you a parallel. We all talk about classical music, our Hindustani music, Carnatic music. Why do we call that as classical music? Because these two styles of music, they achieved a very high benchmark, perfection, and considered as a model, and other types of music. They were always compared with this classical for the purpose of their assessment. Similarly, we say, when we say classical architecture, it means an architecture which achieved great heights and served as a benchmark for the later architecture which followed to be compared with. So what you are seeing is the plan and section of the most famous of the Roman temples, the Pantheon, Rome. And for your kind information, the building is still in existence. That is the wonderful thing. It is still there and it attracts a lot of visitors. It's a wonderful building. Now, when you look at this building, you will appreciate from the plan and the section that it is a circular building. And then there is a porch which is attached to it on one side. So it's a circular building. There is a porch on one side. You can please appreciate that in the plan. You can see the porch there, and how that porch plays a very critical role. Please appreciate that when you have got a circular plan, the entry can be anywhere. So you have to take some effort to highlight the entry. So in this case, the porch is doing that job. So the moment you see the porch, you can easily understand that that is where is the entrance. So you got a porch, and then you got a circular structure. And please look at the section. Okay, when you got a circular structure in the plan, the suitable roof system for that would not be a flat roof. A dome is ideal. And you can see that over many buildings of the past, whenever you have a circular building, the roof will always be domical. Of course, there are other options. For example, it can even be conical. But let us not get into that. That is a job by itself. For the limited purpose of this visual, you have got a dome over the circular structure. The dome profile, if you can kindly look at it, you will appreciate it has got a hemispherical shape. You know what is a hemisphere? Half of a sphere. That is what it is. And please also appreciate that the most the important material that was used here for the construction of this building was Roman concrete. Romans were able to invent concrete, and therefore the Roman structures are much bigger in size compared to the structures of the Greek people. The Greeks were not aware of this material. And what is this concrete? This concrete is not the present day concrete, because there was nothing like a cement. Instead of the present day cement, the Romans used the volcanic ash as a substitute. So Roman concrete was made of volcanic ash. And then of course the other things would be there, fine aggregate, coarse aggregate, etc. So this concrete was a wonderful invention by the Romans. They were able to construct gigantic buildings, and this is a good example of their achievement. And incidentally, the Greeks were not aware of the concept of domes. They used very simple construction, columns and beams, trabeated. You don't have to worry, it's called a trabeated construction, columns and beams, simple, post and lintel, etc. But here you have a new type of a system for the structure of the building, and that is you have got the vaults and the domes, which you do not find in Greek architecture. Now, with this brief introduction, let us look at the answers and identify the correct answers. Answer A, chimneys. All of you know what are chimneys. Chimneys, especially in the cold countries. You know, in the cold countries, today's technology has changed. There is central heating, etc. But even today in the cold countries, in many of the Western countries, European countries, which are further north of the equator, you will find the fireplace to be a very important place in the house. And then when in the fireplace you put the wood and burn it, then the smoke has to escape from the top. So for that purpose, the chimneys were located, projecting beyond the roof of the building, from where the smoke would escape. That is called the chimney. Here there is no such chimney, as you can see in the section. So chimneys is a wrong answer. I told you what are chimneys. There are no chimneys here. The pediment, you have already looked at the pediment in the last visual, triangular part. It is not there, obviously. In the, pediment is related to a roof which has a slope. So sloping roof, sloping on both sides. At the top there is a ridge, and then it slopes downwards both sides. That is not here. So chimneys is wrong. Why I have explained. Pediment is also wrong, because the roof system, there is no scope for a pediment. The roof is a dome, hemispherical dome, which goes with the circular profile in the plan. So pediment is also the wrong answer. C is oculus. What is oculus? Oculus. Oculus is not octopus. Let us not confuse between oculus and octopus. Just for the fun of it, I am saying. Because the students always like some jokes. So it is very common for me to crack the jokes in the class. So whatever word rhymes together with the architectural term, I will say it. And sometimes the students will fall for it also. So it is just a joke. So oculus, what is oculus? Oculus is an opening at the top of the roof. Now here what is wonderful is, at the topmost part of the hemispherical dome, you have got a circular opening. What is the purpose of the circular opening? The purpose of the circular opening is to admit light into the building. Light. So the light comes to the interior of the Pantheon by means of the circular opening which is provided at the top. And in fact, that was completely open. There was no covering for that oculus also. So the sunlight that comes from the top, it comes in the form of a beam, huge beam. The beam of light will gradually shift as the day progresses. You can kindly appreciate, with respect to the earth, the sun will move from the morning to evening. There will be the movement of the sun, and therefore corresponding to that movement in the sky, the beam of light falling into the interior will also change its direction. So it is a wonderful visual effect that you have inside this Pantheon, and facilitating this wonderful visual effect is the oculus at the top. So you can see that in the section, that the cut part, so that is the oculus. So oculus is a correct answer. Then we will go to the horizontal axis. Now, when you look at this plan of this building, you can see an axis. See you can see the interior of the rotunda we call it, the circular shape that you see for the plan. You can see the niches. In the interior part, there are niches. That means, openings, rather, what you say for niches. There is a setback. So you can see that niches, several niches over there, and therefore you can think of a very important horizontal axis which passes through the entrance, through the porch, and it connects to the niche that is exactly opposite the entrance. So you can kindly appreciate that axis which is passing through the entrance porch, through the opening for the circular building, and also connecting the niche which is exactly opposite the entrance. So there is one strong horizontal axis, but there are more axes over there. Why? Because there are so many niches. So you can appreciate one more axis forming there, horizontal axis, connecting the two opposite niches, and then one more axis. You can please see, you can kindly see one more axis connecting two opposite niches, and then one more, this axis. So all of these, so you can please appreciate that there are several axes, horizontal axes in this building. And when you look at the plan, you can see that very clearly. The most important one, of course, is the one that passes through the porch, the entrance door, and the niche that is exactly opposite the entrance door. But there are other axes also. So D is correct. Horizontal axis, plural. AXES is plural. AXIS is singular. So because there are several axes, D is a correct answer. Now let us go to E. E is a peristyle. And I crack a joke in the class, students. Peri is a Tamil. Tamil is a peri. Peri means big. I tell them peristyle is big style. Then I will tell them what is the correct answer. Then they will laugh, of course. So this is a joke. Peristyle. What is peristyle? Peristyle refers to a ring of columns which surround a structure. A ring of columns. For example, suppose you have got a dome, and below the dome there will be a drum. Drum will be a cylindrical part. Over that, the hemispherical part is called the dome. So the drum, many times you will find in church buildings, surrounding the cylindrical part, which is of course circular in plan, you will find a ring of columns, and that ring of columns is called peristyle. No such thing is here. So that is not a correct answer. Peristyle is not a correct answer because you do not have, you can see the plan, it will be very clear. You do not find any ring of columns that surround the building. So therefore, it is not a correct answer. Then F is obviously a correct answer because the porch is such an important element here. You can see the porch, magnificent porch, a huge, you can see in the section, you can see the ceiling height for the porch, which is so substantial, which is very substantial. And that is because the porch has to be equally big when compared to the rest of the building. So the porch is gigantic. Why? Because it has to correspond to the size of the building behind it. So porch is obviously a correct answer. Then vertical axis. Vertical axis, what is happening? You please see the section and compare it with the plan, and you can see the oculus. So please visualize one axis which passes through the center of the oculus and also the center of the circular shape in the plan. So in the plan, that axis will look like a point, In the section, it will look like a straight line. So you can see that, in fact, this vertical axis is the most powerful axis in this whole building. And all of you will kindly appreciate a vertical axis can be very powerful. So when a person enters this building and looks at the building from inside, that fellow will be awestruck. Why he will be awestruck? There is such a powerful axis. Because when you look upwards, you can see the oculus and that vertical axis connecting the center of the circular shape in the plan to the center of the oculus. You have got a very strong vertical axis. Therefore, the vertical axis is a correct answer. So now you can easily understand H. Already we have identified the 4 correct answers. That has to be wrong, the H. Gallery. Why the gallery is not a correct answer? Let me explain. Gallery means in many buildings, what happens is an upper level will be created, and let us say there is a lobby at the upper level. On one side there will be the wall, on the other side there will be pillars, and from that side, when you look down below, you get a nice view of what is happening at the ground level. And at the center, let us say it is a 2-storied. Let us say at the center it is a full height, 2-story height. But along the sides, it can be just 1 story. It could be divided into 2 parts, lower level and upper level. Upper level, one side you can see the dead wall. The other side you can overlook the central part of the building. So any activities there, people can stand there and watch. It provides extra accommodation for the people to stand there and look at the activities happening down below on the ground floor. So that is a gallery. Is a picture gallery. In a gallery, what is most important is the view. So for enjoying the view, you require space. And the space that you create at a higher level will be even better compared sometimes to the lower level, because you cannot accommodate too many people at the same level. So you create extra space at the upper level, and it will overlook the central space, what is happening at the lower level. So that is called a gallery. That is obviously not here. It is there in several other situations. So in that situation, gallery will be a correct answer. Here there is no such gallery. So the 4 answers have been identified. Shall we go to the next slide, please? This is another very famous building. And the good news is the building is still existing. It is in Istanbul. It is originally, it was designed as a church building. It's called Hagia Sophia, Istanbul. It underwent a lot of changes. For quite some time, it had become a mosque. It had become a mosque for quite some time. Now, of course, it is still very much there. It is a preserved building, very much there. And you see later on, when it became a mosque, the minarets were added. The minarets, of course, had no purpose in the beginning because it was a church. When it got converted into a mosque, the minarets were added, and in the interiors, a lot of calligraphy, that means beautiful handwriting, was provided when it became a mosque. And incidentally, all of you are aware that in the case of Islamic architecture, the beautiful calligraphy means beautiful handwriting, handwritten from right to left, of course. It is very common in the case of mosques. You will find such beautiful inscriptions. So that has happened. And when people look at the building, they will be puzzled if somebody tells them it was a church. This is the reason why you will find that calligraphy. Now that is a separate point. So look at the plan, and it is a gigantic building. Look at the plan and look at the section. You can see, again, you can see the dome at the top, very appropriate, because in the church buildings, there would invariably be a dome for the central part of the church. It was a very common thing. Now, let us look at the answers, and one by one we will understand whether an answer is right or not. First of all, A, arches. Now, the answer is obvious. When you look at the section of this building, you can find a lot of this arcading all over the place. You can see the smaller arches, bigger arches. You can see the bigger arch there, then below that you can see the smaller arches. In fact, there are so many arches over here. So obviously, what is very clearly visible from the image is that arches is a correct answer. Then let us look at B. It is called semidome. Now let us understand what is a semidome. I will try to make it as simple as possible. A semidome, to put it in a very simple way, is a half dome. And how do you get a semidome? I will describe. Suppose you take, let us say, a tennis ball, cut it into two parts. Each part will be a hemispherical dome. Now what you do is, you cut that hemispherical tennis ball into two parts in a vertical fashion. That means in a vertical fashion, you cut it into two parts. Then there will be two parts and each of them will be a semidome. Now, where is that semidome here? Let me explain. You can see at the top there is a dome, and then adjoining you can see what is happening in the section. You can see that dark patch. So you can please now try to visualize how it is similar to the tennis ball, which is cut in the manner I have explained. Okay, tennis ball, first you cut it into two parts, then each will be a hemisphere, but again you cut each part into two more parts in a vertical fashion. You got two semidomes, and compare that, you can visualize that, compare that to the plan. You can see where it is there. It is on top of which part in the plan. You can see the, this part here, which is, roughly, you can say, roughly, not actually exactly semicircular. So you can see in the plan what is the shape, and then you can see in the section what is the roof on that. So that is a semidome, and you can find on both sides the semidomes. In fact, the semidomes are having a very important structural function. They are supporting the central dome. Some of the weight that is coming from the dome at the center is being taken by the semidomes on either side. So you can easily appreciate that structural point here. The semidome is trying to take the load, part of the load at least, not full load, part of the load it is absorbing. So semidomes are very much there. Arches, correct answer. Semidomes, correct answer. See, pediment, you can easily appreciate that it is not a correct answer. You already know what is a pediment. There is no pediment in the plan or the elevation. It is not relevant. So it is a wrong answer. All of you will agree. D, dome is a correct answer, because dome is such an important part of this building. Kindly look at the plan and also look at the section. In the plan, you can see the circular part. That is what is on top of that. You can see in the section, the dome, it is sitting exactly on top of that. So plan also you can identify, and section. So dome is a correct answer. E is oculus. Oculus is a wrong answer, because you appreciated that in the previous visual, the oculus, that means at the very top, a opening that is not there in this case. So oculus is not the correct answer. Then F is piers. What are piers? Let me explain. Piers are different from columns. All of you must be easily knowing what is a column or a pillar. If you go to any Hindu temple, you will find pillars. Now, pillars, all said and done, you will appreciate, they cannot take huge loads. They can take limited loads. And if you go to the Hindu temple, you will find that in the mandapa, there are several pillars. And the gap between each pillar is very less, because in those days, they had to go by the rule of thumb, and only granite, most cases granite pillars. So the spacing between one pillar and another pillar, let us say, is only hardly 10 foot or 3 meters, which is, today you can increase it by a very large extent because of technology, because of RCC, steel, etc. Let us not get into that. So the point here is, what are piers? So in those days, what they did to support heavy loads, columns were not adequate. So what they did, they went in for piers. That means out of the brick masonry or out of the stone masonry, they constructed these gigantic piers. So piers were built for taking very high loads, where the columns were not useful or they couldn't take so much weight. So here you can see the gigantic piers in the plan, 4 of them. If you can please look at them, 4 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, centrally located. They're really gigantic. These are the piers. So they are built of masonry, stone masonry, brick masonry, and they can take huge loads. And here they were required because you have such a huge dome over there. So the entire weight of that will have to be taken mainly by these piers. So piers is a correct answer. And then already 4 answers are correct. So the last one, G, has to be wrong. Sphere. There is, in some buildings, that sphere will be relevant in the sense that the interior you can, for example, I will tell you the previous visual which you saw, that Pantheon Rome, it is possible to insert a sphere inside that space, roughly. So that kind of a space is not here. So that is not relevant, because that sphere, the earlier building, the plan was circular. Please appreciate, plan was circular, and there was a domical roof, and it was possible to roughly fit a cylinder into the profile of the interior space of the Pantheon. That is not relevant here. Sphere is a wrong answer. Next, please. This building is so famous. Even in your lower classes, you would have heard about this very famous building. It is called the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Very famous building. And this Leaning Tower of Pisa is a part of the Pisan complex. Pisan complex. There are several other buildings here. In fact, this is not a very important building as such. In fact, the most important building over there is the Pisan Cathedral. Pisan Cathedral is not shown in this visual, but that is very, very important from the religious point of view. And then you have got a baptistry. No, let me not elaborate. Baptistry was a building wherein the conversion of the non-Christians to Christianity would be done in a ritualistic manner. So a separate building where the rituals connected with baptism, that means the process by which a person is taken into the fold of Christianity, the rituals associated with that, they happened in the baptistry. A separate building was constructed. So you will find in this Pisan complex a cathedral, a baptistry, and this is, in fact, in many church buildings, cathedrals, this is a bell tower. Bell tower is usually a part and parcel of the cathedral building in most cases. So here it is separate from the cathedral. That is all fine. In many cases, they will be separate. In most cases, they will be part of the cathedral. But what is special about this is the leaning nature of the building. And that is why it has become so famous. Otherwise, it would not have become so famous. All of you will kindly appreciate. Because it is leaning. And why it is leaning also, there is a clear-cut scientific explanation. The differential settlement in the soil. See, finally, the entire load of any building will have to be transferred to the ground. And if the ground is equally strong or equally strong in all the places, there is no issue. But suppose the ground is strong in one place and weak in another place, where it is weak, the structure will go down. So when that goes down, this is what will happen. The leaning of the tower. Because of we call it, you don't have to break your head. It is called a differential settlement of the soil. That means no uniform strength for the soil in all the parts which are below the structure. So one part below the structure is weak, another part below the structure is strong. So where it is weak, there will be sinking because of the weight. And this is what results. But a lot of effort now has gone in to see that it is stabilized. That work has happened. Now let us come to the question and the answers. Now let us look at the elements. First of all, piers. You have already got an idea what are these piers. The piers, you don't see any piers here, gigantic supports. In fact, that kind of a load is not there in the first place. Piers obviously is not a correct answer. B, buttresses. What are these buttresses? Buttresses are structural supports which are given to a wall which is long. And you can easily understand a buttress. I will give you a very common example. All of you must have seen a compound. Any building has got a compound. Your own house will have a compound. Now please look closely at the compound. The compound will not be a wall which is uniform in thickness. At certain points, at certain intervals, let us say at 3-meter intervals, you can see the buttress. So the buttress, the purpose of it is to strengthen the wall. Without the buttress, the wall will fall down after some time. So the purpose of the buttress is to strengthen the wall. So at regular intervals, if the wall is very long, compound, then the buttresses are provided so that the wall is stabilized and it will not fall. So buttresses are obviously not here. That is not a correct answer. C, semicircular arches obviously is a correct answer because you can see those arches all over the place on the facade of the building, exterior surface of the building. You can see the semicircular arches in all the floors. You can see that, and you can see those, slender columns. Also, you please look at the semicircular arches. The span is not much, but supports, if you see, the columns are very slender. In fact, the right way to describe it, it is described as lace-like. What is lace? Shoelace. You know how shoelace is? Very, very slender, thin. So that is the word that is used to describe the appearance of these pillars. A shoelace, lace-like columns. So obviously, semicircular arches you can easily observe, and you can also please appreciate the supports for the semicircular arches, which are very slender in nature. So both C and D are obviously correct. E are dormers. Let me first explain what are dormers. Dormers are openings. You know openings. Openings are usually windows and doors. Windows are provided on the surfaces of the walls. You know what is the purpose? You want to get light into the building. Fine. But what are dormers? Dormers are openings which are provided in the roof of the building, especially when there is a sloping roof. When you got a sloping roof and you introduce an opening in the roof itself, it is called a dormer. Now that dormer is obviously not here and therefore it is a wrong answer. So kindly note that a dormer is a opening in the roof of the building. There is no such thing here. Then F, blind
Excuse me,
arcade.
sir.
Yes.
So
Yes.
like dormers and oculus aren't both same?
No, no, no. Oh, it's a good question. Let me clarify to you. No, dormers and oculus are not the same because oculus is a opening at the topmost part of the roof. Oculus, topmost part, what you saw in the Pantheon. On the other hand, a dormer to understand, you think of a roof which is sloping in nature. When you think of a roof which is sloping in nature, at the top there is a ridge, there are two sloping sides. Along the sloping side, if you introduce an opening, it becomes dormer. Okay. Oculus is always at the topmost part of the roof. Dormers are not at that level. They are at a much lower level. So I tried to explain that you take, I mean, what example? So you take the, any sloping roof, so many examples you will have. And especially if you can visualize these Kerala roofs are like that. Kerala, the roofs are all sloping because of rain. And you will find dormers over there. Along the sloping surface of the roof, these openings are provided. That is called a dormer. On the other hand, oculus is a opening at the topmost part of the roof. The dormers are not at the topmost part. And dormers are provided for the sloping roofs. Oculus, because it is the topmost part of the roof. You saw that in the case of Pantheon. That is oculus. But a dormer is different. It is along the sloping sides of the roof. So there is a difference between the dormer and the oculus. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So now you got an idea of why dormers is not a right answer here. There is no such dormer here. There is no sloping roof. There is no window there. Then we will go to F, which is blind arcade. What is a blind arcade? It requires some explanation. You look at the upper floors, you can see there is a space there for movement. You can see the gap between the inner wall and the outer ring of columns. And you can also see the shadow that is cast on the inner wall by the projecting slender columns and arcades. But look at the ground floor. In the ground floor, you will find semicircular arches and you will find some pillars also. But the point is, there is no depth to it. There is, you see, you compare the ground floor semicircular arches and the pillars to the upper floor semicircular arches and pillars. There is a big difference. What is that difference? In the upper floors, there is a depth and there is a space there. There is a gap between the columns and the inner wall. You look at the ground floor, what is happening? The blind arcade. Blind arcade means there is no real depth. Okay, it is only, what is the purpose of a blind arcade? Blind arcade is only for the purpose of the visual effect. So you please look at this blind arcade. That is what is a blind arcade, because there is no depth to it. You look at the arcade and below what happens, it is a dead wall. So you compare it to the upper floor, there is a big difference. There is a gap. So at the lower level, the lowermost level, the ground floor, what you see is a blind arcade, and the purpose of the blind arcade is not functional. It is mainly for the visual appearance. But in the upper floor, there is a purpose to it. There is a gap. People can move around that. And then that projection has to be supported. And for supporting, you require those pillars and arches. So there is a difference between the arcading that you find in the upper floor levels compared to the arcading that you see at the ground floor level. There is a big difference, and that is why we call it as a blind arcade. So blind arcade is a correct answer. Let us go to G. G is division of floors. Division of floors obviously is a right answer because you can see the projections which clearly demarcate one floor from the another. So each floor is clearly demarcated by those horizontal divisions, very clear demarcation. That is very much evident from the visual. Division of floors. You can easily count the number of floors. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, totally 8 floors. So the lowermost floor, you got the blind arcade. And then the topmost places, of course, for the location of the bell. The bell is located inside that topmost story that you see there. The bell is located over there. Bells are located at the topmost part of the bell tower. So, and H statues is obviously a wrong answer because we have already counted 4 right answers. Semicircular arches, slender columns, blind arcade, division of floors. All these 4 are correct answers. So last one, statues. You don't see any statues in this visual. Statues are very common in the case of cathedrals, especially in the Renaissance period. What happens is at the topmost part, to coincide with the profile of the column below, you will have statues. Statues, of course, related to the Christian theme, that is always there. The disciples of Christ are the evangelists who spread the message of Christianity all around the world. So, are other religious leaders. Those statues you will find, but here you don't find it. So, statues is not the right answer. Next, please. This is again such a famous building. It is very much in existence, is fully functional. So wonderful, I would say it is the most fascinating space anywhere on this earth. It is the St. Peter's Cathedral, which you see on to your left-hand side. And in front, you can see that wonderful foreground. Please appreciate, foreground is very much required if you want to appreciate a building. And I give the example. See, look at the foreground here, how it creates a nice setup, an enclosure for the people to congregate and enjoy. Of course, it has got a function. People have to congregate here. So that the main purpose is they want to get a view of the Pope, who will give appearances on certain occasions from the balcony. That is a function. But look at the pure aesthetics of it. The foreground creates that wonderful setup, which will help you to appreciate the cathedral. Okay. So any building requires a foreground, and the taller the building, the more the foreground you require. And I'll give you the opposite examples from Bengaluru. All of you must be familiar with this Vidhana Saudha. Next time when you look at it, please look at the foreground. Foreground is totally insufficient. Such a long building, Vidhana Saudha, and also the height, G+3 floors, 4 floors. But look at such a long, elongated building with a long, facade, and then it is of substantial height also. Compared to that, what is the space you have in front? The road is too close. So you cannot appreciate in one glance the entire view of Vidhana Saudha because of inadequate foreground. On the other hand, here the foreground is wonderful. There is a reason for that. A great architect, Bernini, he designed this piazza. It is called a piazza. P-I-A-Z-Z-A. Piazza means not a pizza. These students, they like pizza so much. When I say piazza in the class, and they think of the pizza, I tell them jovially, Appa, pizza pizza you eat. I don't know how you eat pizza and all that. I will say that is, of course, in a lighter vein. But coming back to the point here, this is called a piazza. Piazza is the public enclosure space. So you can see the wonderful enclosure space in front of a very important building, namely the St. Peter's Cathedral in Rome. So these piazzas were built in large numbers during the Renaissance period of architecture. Now let us not get into that. That is again, everything is a ocean. So much knowledge exists that we should, time is not sufficient, and our work that you do should be so much that you go deep into the subject matter. That is another point of view. Now, so you have got a famous cathedral, St. Peter's Cathedral. In front of it, you have got this piazza. To put it in a simple way, it is a public enclosed space. That's all. If you find a piazza uncomfortable. And the enclosure in front of it, from the view, you have to identify 4 important design elements. Let us go one by one. Asymmetry. You know, all of you must be knowing what is symmetry. Symmetry along any axis. For example, an aeroplane is symmetrical with respect to one axis. What happens on the right side? The mirror image of that happens on the left side. So symmetry means with respect to a given axis, the one part is a mirror image of the other part. That is the definition of symmetry. Asymmetry means the opposite. Okay. For example, birds are symmetrical, aeroplanes are symmetrical. Many most natural things on this earth are symmetrical. Even a human being, the profile of the human being is roughly symmetrical. The profile of animals, elephants, dogs, roughly symmetrical, not exactly, roughly symmetrical. Asymmetry means the lack of symmetry. Now, obviously, A is wrong because you can find a strong symmetry. You can kindly visualize a line that meets the center of this facade of this cathedral. Suppose you join that to this, the important vertical element that you see in front. It is called an obelisk. We will come to that later. An obelisk. Suppose you can visualize a line that passes through this vertical element inside the enclosure, and then connecting that to the front of the entrance door of the cathedral. And if you stretch that line beyond, you can kindly see there is a road there. So that is a very powerful axis. So with respect to that axis, the building is symmetrical. What happens on the left side is a mirror image of what happens on the right side. So the building has got symmetry. Therefore, asymmetry is not correct. Number 1. B, semi-dome is obviously not correct. Now you know what is a semi-dome. You have to first think of a hemispherical dome. You have to cut it into 2 parts. It is not obviously there. You can see a dome, of course. A dome is such an important part of this cathedral, but there is no semi-dome. So both are not correct. A and B gone. Then we will come to see central axis. Obviously, it is correct. Just now I explained why it is correct. You look at that line connecting the vertical element to the entrance door of the cathedral and then stretch it behind. There is a road there. So you have got a very powerful central axis. And that is what makes this composition symmetrical. So central axis is a correct answer. Now we will come to D, which is obelisk. What are these obelisks? Obelisks they are originally from Egypt. Now they are vertical stone structures. Their plan is square in shape. In plan, it is a square. And in the view, what happens is, as you can easily appreciate, it tapers towards the top. So to put it in geometrical terms, you think of a square pyramid. You think of a square pyramid. Only thing is, the height is very substantial compared to the size at the bottom. So it goes up, and as it goes up, the square will diminish in size because it tapers. And the reason is very simple. Because of the law of gravity, anything that is vertical, it will be very stable if you reduce the weight towards the top. It's always like that. Suppose you take a Buddhist stupa towards the top, the weight will have to be less. Obviously, law of gravity, same thing for the obelisk. And therefore, in the plan, it is a square. You can say the view of it, it is pyramidal, but towards the top, it tapers. And at the very top, what happens there? You chop it off, you get a small square, and over that you put another small pyramid. That is the overall form of the obelisk, Egyptian obelisk. So vertical element, square in plan, and elongated, that means it has a substantial height, and at the top there is a small chotasa pyramid on top. Chotasa, pyramid can be huge or very small also. You can make a small pyramid, square pyramid, a small square pyramid at the very top. And then below, of course, is an elongated structure, square in plan, tapering towards the top. That is the Egyptian obelisk. But one thing you have to appreciate, many conquerors, they have taken away this obelisk from the Egypt and taken it to their own countries. It has happened, it's very common. All of you know about the British. Our Kohinoor diamond also is gone. So many things, our own idols, Hindu temple idols, many of them have been taken away and they have been put in foreign museums, which is very sad. So it is something similar here. So you have got this obelisk here that was there even before this Pisa was built. It was there before. So that putting the obelisk in that spot was an earlier event. But the moment it was there, it was preserved. It was not removed. So taking the location of the obelisk, other things were designed around the obelisk. So obelisk is a correct answer. So now we have the central axis, which is correct. Obelisk, the vertical element which you see at the center of the oval enclosure. Please appreciate, it is a oval enclosure. If you look at that space, it is not circular, it is oval, or you can call it elliptical. You can call it elliptical. That please follow that shape, oval or elliptical shape. Okay. And at the center, you can see that obelisk. So obelisk, the central axis is correct. Obelisk is correct. Then E is radial symmetry. Symmetry, I explained. What is the difference between? You can have two types of symmetry. One is called bilateral symmetry. Another is called radial symmetry. What is the difference between bilateral symmetry and radial symmetry? Bilateral symmetry is symmetry with respect to one axis. And in this case, you can kindly appreciate the bilateral symmetry that is there. So that axis I have already mentioned to you. Keeping that axis in mind, you can see there is a symmetry. That means with respect to that axis, there is symmetry. But with respect to other axis, there is no symmetry. If you take the entire composition of the Pisa and the cathedral, the symmetry exists only with respect to one axis. What is radial symmetry? Very simple to understand. Suppose you take this tennis ball. Tennis ball you all play with it. You take a tennis ball, you can cut it with respect to one axis so that there is symmetry. Now you can change that plane, vertical plane, so many times, and that along several axes there is symmetry. So a sphere has got symmetry with respect to just not one axis, but with respect to several axes. So if any form has got symmetry with respect to several axes, it is called radial symmetry. If any structure has got symmetry with respect to one single axis, it is called bilateral symmetry. So here what you have is bilateral symmetry. There is no radial symmetry. Therefore, radial symmetry is a wrong answer. Central axis is correct, obelisk is correct. Dome over the drum. Now, please look at the dome over the cathedral. What is happening? So, at the top, you got a domical form, but below that dome, you can see a cylindrical drum. You can see the cylindrical drum there. So, the drum, I will also explain what is the purpose of the drum. Now, the drum means it is a cylinder. Geometrically, it is a cylinder. Now, on top of the cylinder, you got a dome. The base of the dome is circular. The top of the cylinder is also circular. So they go together. Fine. But what is the purpose of the drum? The purpose of the drum is to increase the height of the dome to whatever extent you want. You want a dome which is visible from different parts of the city. What do? You create a drum. You create a bigger drum. The drum you can put any size. Of course, the load will increase. That is always there. So if you go for a drum below the dome, the height of the dome as seen from outside will be increased. And all these cathedrals were built in such a way that people had to look at this dome from distant parts of the city. So the purpose of the drum is to provide extra height to the dome. So therefore, but the point here is dome over the drum is absolutely correct. Then we go to G, which is keyhole composition. You may wonder, ye kya hota hai? Very simple. Keyhole. All of you, please think of the key. These door locks, keys are there. You open the door with the key. Carefully observe the profile of the key. There are two parts to it. One is the circular part at the top, and below that, attached to that circular part, you have got a trapezoidal shape. So, of course, it is too small, but the shape that you see for the keyhole, and then you insert the key to the keyhole. So the shapes will be exactly the same. So the keyhole also will have a similar shape. There is a circular part at the top, and then there is a trapezoidal shape at the bottom. Same thing over here. You kindly appreciate. Now we will show you that. So this is one part, and then you look at the other part. This one. You look at the other part. So you can please appreciate the comparison between this shape, huge of course, extremely huge, and the shape of the keyhole. So the comparison is there, similarity is there. That is why this is called a keyhole composition in geometrical terms. Now it is a rough comparison. Okay. Overall shape is similar. That's why we call it keyhole. But then there are some differences that you don't have to break your head. The actual shape of this enclosure is oval. It is not circular. Please, oval. And then that connecting space with the front of the cathedral is actually trapezoidal. So trapezoidal plus oval, that is the correct shape here. Geometrically, that is the correct shape. But the point is not that. The point is it is very similar in the overall shape compared to a keyhole. That is why it is called a keyhole composition. Now, I think we have already identified 4: central axis, obelisk, dome over the drum, keyhole composition. The opposite, the last one is obviously wrong because ulta ho gaya na. You look at F and H, only one of them can be correct. No, there is a dome over the drum. The drum cannot be over the dome. Sorry, Puri. So drum over dome is incorrect answer. Dome over drum is the correct answer. So we have identified the 4 correct answers. Next, please. Now you cannot expect any building to be more famous than this in India at least. All of you are familiar with the Taj Mahal. And from the view, 4 important design features are to be identified. Let us look at them one by one. First of all, random rubble. Sorry, random rubble. Random rubble means roughly cut stones which are put together as masonry. Random rubble masonry we call it. That means the stones are all of irregular size and you put them together and make a wall out of it. And that is called random rubble masonry. Obviously incorrect. Gone. Let us go to vaulted niches. Now earlier, we used that word, niche. In the case of the Pantheon, if you remember. So obviously there is, you can see the niches all over the place. You can see so many niches there. Right at the center, you can see that niche. Arch is there in the front, but it goes inside. There is space there. Now, what happens for the roof, for that part? That is called a vault. Vault, not VOLT, please. Electric shock alapa. This is different. VAULT. And our students, all kinds of jokes happen. Suppose you ask them to take down volt, they will write VOLT. ಇದೇನ್ರೋ ಇದು ಎಲೆಕ್ಟ್ರಿಕ್ ಶಾಕ್ ಏನ್ರೋ ಅಂತೇಳಿ ಜೋಕ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಇಲ್ಲಪ್ಪ ಅಂತೇಳಿ ಹೇಳ್ಕೊಡ್ಬೇಕು. VAULT. What is this word? No, please appreciate, when you have got this arched niche, what happens to the roof? What will be the shape of the roof? The shape of the roof will be a vault. There are different types of vaults. You don't have to break your head at this stage. For example, there can be barrel vault. That is what you find in many cases when the plan is a rectangle and then on top you have got this barrel vault, semicircular vault, which runs through. Incidentally, an vault is an extension of the arch. Suppose you have an arch and then you extend it, you get a vault. So first, second answer, vaulted niches is correct because you can see several niches. The biggest niche is, of course, right at the center, but on the sides you can see smaller niches. And the roof over the niches obviously is curvilinear. That is called a vault, and you can see that. There are so many niches and vaults. So vaulted niches is correct. Minarets is obviously correct. So you can see this tower-like structures, slender tower-like structures, a very common feature, design feature of the Islamic architecture, minarets. And let me just digress a little bit and give you some more inputs about the minarets. It's a very interesting thing that you will find. You may not have observed, it doesn't matter, you are still new to the subject. See, minarets in Islamic countries, in countries where the majority of the population is of Muslims, there is really not much need for the minarets. Why? Because the sky is high. On the other hand, suppose you take countries like India, where the majority population is different from Islam, you find a lot of minarets. Why? Because a minaret is a tall tower, and the tall tower can be seen from distant places. So, next to the mosque, if you put a minaret, the minaret can be seen from long distance, and if the majority population is not Islamic, the point is being conveyed visually that in that area there is a substantial Muslim population. Look at the symbolism of architecture. Architecture conveys meaning. So the presence of a minaret, which is tall, which can be seen from a long distance, conveys the point that there is a substantial Muslim population in that locality. Therefore, that minaret becomes an important element of design in such countries where Muslims are in a minority. Example, India. So minarets are common features. When the country is fully Islamic, you take Saudi Arabia or Pakistan or even Bangladesh, no need, because the majority population is Islamic only. Where is the need to announce that there is a population? Uska matlab nahi hai. So now you understand the meaning of minarets, tall structures. Minarets are obviously there at the corners, four corners, and they also serve an aesthetic purpose. They try to frame the structure, the tomb structure at the center. Okay. So there is an aesthetic purpose also, but there is a functional purpose which I told you. So vaulted niches is correct, minarets is correct. White glazed tiles. Sorry, no question of glazed tiles here. All of you know what is the material used here. It is obviously marble. Makrana marble. That is the type of marble which is used. Makrana marble is a fine variety of marble. Makrana is a place in Rajasthan, where you all of you know, in India, where do you get marble? Marble means Rajasthan. So people in Bengaluru purchase from Rajasthan, they transport it by road because it works out cheaper for them. That is the point. So you see, marble. So white glazed tiles is obviously a wrong answer. E. Chatris. What are these chatris? Chatri means, don't think of Kannada chatri. Chatri means umbrella. Chatri kodapa. And there is another slang which is very awkward. Chatri appa means a troublemaker. Chatri. So don't get confused. What is this Chhatri? Chhatri is a structure. You can, in English I will translate. It is a pillared kiosk. K-I-O-S-K. Kiosk. You can see that Chhatris, now we will point the arrow at these Chhatris. There are several Chhatris. You can see one Chhatri there, another Chhatri here, and even on top of the minarets, you can see these Chhatris. There are Chhatris all over the place. See, they are not really functional. They are purely for aesthetic purposes. Only for visual effect, these Chhatris are there. They are very important components of design elements of Islamic architecture. Chhatris are very common. So if you go to North India, especially if you go to Delhi, where you have a large number of Islamic monuments, you can find Chhatris all over the place. So go to Delhi, you will find. So Chhatri is correct. So we have identified vaulted niches, minarets, Chhatris. F is onion dome. What is this onion dome? Irulli. Now the point you have to kindly appreciate is that that central dome, if you look at the shape of it, it is not hemispherical. It is, if you want, use the word bulbous. It is elongated towards the top. That means there is a similarity between the shape of the dome and the shape of the onion. Okay. So onion dome is correct because the shape of the dome resembles the shape of the onion. I think all of you are very familiar with onion. Please compare that shape to the shape of this dome. Very similar. So onion dome is correct. So we have already identified vaulted niches, minarets, Chhatris, onion dome. So the next two cannot be correct because only 4 answers are correct. Colonnade, you know now what is a colonnade? A colonnade is a row of columns. ये कुछ भी नहीं है इधर, गलत है. Italian marble सारी पूरी जो the marble is obtained from Makarana in Rajasthan. Italian marble, of course, many people and some of you, the NATA aspirants, you may have Italian marble in your homes. Fine, good, please have it. But the point is, for the Taj Mahal, the fine variety of marble found in Maharana in Rajasthan, they were used. So Italian marble is a wrong answer. So we have got the 4 answers. Next, please. Oh, no. Is that no? Next one. Okay. Next. Correct, huh? Now let us look at a very famous, very famous structure down south. All of you must have heard about Tanjavur. Or you can say Tanjore. No, it's called Tanjavur is correct. Local name. And Tanjavur is famous for what is called the big temple. Big temple, I think the foreigners call it. Foreigners, you know, they cannot pronounce our names. They do all kinds of things. They will distort our names. Bangalore, you know, it is all anglicized. Bengaluru is correct. Our local name is Bengaluru, Mysuru. And you know what the British people did? They anglicized. Tanjore. No, Tanjavur. Now this Brihadeshwar temple, Tanjavur, is very famous primarily because of the tall tower over the sanctum sanctorum. There is a technical, it's called Vimana. Vimana is the entire structure inside which there is the idol. So the Garbhagriha, not only in the plan, but if you look at it in the 3rd dimension, the whole structure, including that tower above, that entire thing in one go, that is what is called Vimana. Vimana is the most important component of the Dravidian temple. See, incidentally, I am reminded that this is the last slide because the time is up. So I will complete the discussion with this slide. Next Monday, I will take up the next session. So that is the point. Now let me complete this. So what you find is, I was trying to tell you the difference between Vimana. What is a Vimana? So the most famous component of this temple is the Vimana. It towers into the sky, roughly about 200-foot height from the pavement level. So it's a gigantic structure, wonderful achievement. Please appreciate in those days. It is built during the Chola period, Raja Chola. Huge structure. Imagine the technology, how they attained such a great perfection in the way they have aligned all the parts of the building. Wonderful achievement. So Vimana, that is what is very famous here. So Vimana, the central part, you can see it in the plan also. You can see it in the plan. That square, you know, Vimana is always square in plan. Square is a very sacred shape for the Hindus. You may be familiar with it. Square is a very sacred shape for Hindus. All right. Then there is the Gopuram. Gopuram is another component of the Dravidian temple. Gopuram is the entrance, the tower that you find at the entrance into the temple. So when you enter the temple, first you pass through the Gopuram. And one important difference is the Vimana is always a square in plan. The Gopuram is always rectangular in plan. Please look at the Gopuram, which you see in the front. Rectangular shape for the Gopuram, square shape for the Vimana, and which is more important, all of you know, it is the idol sanctum sanctorum. So Vimana is more sacred, square is a perfect shape, rectangle not so perfect. So there is a lot of symbolism in all this. So the point here is that the Vimana is very famous here, and let us now try to find out the correct answer. A is Garuda Stambha. Garuda Stambha. Now it is, please understand, in the Hindu temples there are two types: Vaishnavite, Shaivite. Vaishnavite, Shaivite. So either you are a Vaishnavite or you are a Shaivite in most cases, any Hindu. And temples are also like that, dedicated to either Lord Shiva or to Lord Vishnu. So you know the name of the temple, Brihadeshwar, Ishvara. So Ishvara, for Ishvara the vehicle is Nandi. For Vishnu the vehicle is Garuda. So obviously Garuda Stambha is a wrong answer. Garuda is not associated with Garuda is not associated with Ishvara. So obviously, Garuda Stambha means a pole that is there usually in front of a temple, and it symbolizes the temple itself, the vehicle of the Lord. So Garuda is obviously not correct. Garuda refers to Vishnu's vehicle. This is Brihadeshwara, Ishvara, so wrong. B, Antarala. Now what is Antarala? Let me tell you. Antarala, you please understand what is marked here in this visual. A. That is the cella. That is the right inside it, the actual chamber. You can see a small chamber which contains the idol, that you can please see. That is the cella, and surrounding that cella there is a circumambulatory path all around. You know, this is very common in Hindu temples. You go around the idol several times, 3 times, and for that you can see a circumambulatory path that is there. But you please look at what happens in front of that cella. In front of the cella, you got a rectangular chamber, the longer axis of which is at 90 degrees to the main axis of the temple. Please appreciate what is the main axis of the temple. It passes through the cella and the gopuram. So that is the main axis of the temple. Usually the main axis will be east-west. All of you know this. The temples usually face the east. Not all the time. Let us not get into that. Most of the times the orientation is east-west, because east is a sacred direction for the Hindus. The idols will be facing the east. But now kindly appreciate the long axis passing through the gopuram in the front and the cella at the rear part of the temple. That is the main axis. Now you look at that rectangular chamber in front of the cella. What is marked as B over here? That B, if you look at it, the longer axis of the rectangle is exactly at 90 degrees to the main axis of the temple. That is called Antarala. Antarala connects the cella to the mandapa. Mandapa is a pillared hall. You can see the pillared hall, which is mandapa. And the connection between the mandapa and the cella is achieved through this Antarala. So that is a very important part of the Dravidian temple. Temples are Dravidian and Indo-Aryan, 2 categories basically. Dravidians roughly South Indian, Indo-Aryan roughly North Indian. Okay, roughly. There are a lot of intricacies. This is not the time to get into that. So you can see the Antarala there. So Antarala is correct answer. C is Prakara, which is very easy. Any temple, if you go, there is an enclosure wall. All around the enclosure wall, you can see the Prakara. All around enclosure wall is a common element of any Dravidian temple. Okay. So obviously the prakara is a correct answer because the enclosure provides privacy to the inside premises, because inside premises several activities happen. The deity may be taken in a procession, people may be served food, they may eat there, etc., etc. So for the purpose of privacy and for the purpose of enclosure, prakara is required. So antarala is correct, prakara is correct. Then Nandi Mandapa. Nandi Mandapa, what is marked as D over there? And I told you earlier, Nandi is the vehicle of Lord Shiva. A Mandapa, a small pillared hall, right in front of the temple along the main axis. Nandi Mandapa is correct. So we have got Antarala, Prakara, Nandi Mandapa, Kalyana Mandapa. What is Kalyana Mandapa? See, all of you, you know Kalyana Mandaps, you may be knowing in Bengaluru, Chatra. You know what is Chatra? Chatraduta. Sorry. Beda. Mane Uta, Chatraduta. No, let me not get into that. There are a lot of jokes about it. You cannot go to a Chatra and say, Nanage iduruchi illa, aduruchi illa. Can you say that? Chatraduta, whatever they serve, you have to eat. Please understand. Now, let us come to the point. What is Kalyana Mandapa? It's a common terminology among the Hindus. We look at it as a marriage hall. But what is the origin of that concept? The origin of that concept goes to the temples where Kalyana Mandapa became a separate pillared hall inside which the ritualistic marriage between the female deity and the male deity of the temple that happens every year. So a separate space or mandapa was created for performing the rituals related to the marriage ceremony of the female deity and the male deity of the temple inside that space. So now you can connect the two things. Today we talk about Kalyana Mandap. It is derived from the Kalyana Mandapas inside the temples, but that was a later development. During this period of the Cholas, the concept of Kalyana Mandapa in a temple was not there. So that is not the right answer. It was a later development. Then musical pillars, no. Musical pillars you will find in Hampi, not here. That is also not correct. Gopuram is a correct answer because we have already talked about the Gopuram being a very important component. Gopuram and Vimana, two very important components of the temple. What was the purpose of the Gopuram? Very easy to understand. Gopurams were tall structures, and these tall structures would be visible from long distances inside a city. So symbolism. And the peculiar thing in the case of the Brihadeshwar temple, Tanjavur, is that the Vimana, Vimana is the most important part. It's much taller, that's tallest. But in many Hindu temples, you find the reverse happening. What is the reverse? The Gopuram is taller than the Vimana. That is very common. So the point is, from the sacredness point of view, it is always the Vimana which has to be given prominence. But architecturally, it didn't happen in many cases. Architecturally, because of the requirement of visibility from a long distance, the Gopurams were erected, tall Gopurams, and that facilitated the visibility from long distances. But you know, constructing such tall towers over the Vimana is a gigantic task. That is the reason. Vimanas are much smaller. This is an exception. The Brihadeshwar temple Vimana is an exception. Vimanas are not so huge because it requires so much of effort to provide such a huge structure. Gopurams, it is that much easier because the size of the Gopuram is much smaller. Okay, so Gopuram is a correct answer, obviously. So we have identified Antarala, Prakara, Nandi Mandapa, Gopuram. then obviously H is a wrong answer. We do not have the 1,000-pillared hall. You will find 1,000-pillared hall not here, but in the later period. In the case of the Madurai temple, you will find the 1,000. You must have heard about the Madurai Meenakshi temple. So there you will find that 1,000-pillared hall, not here. So these are the 4 correct answers. So I think with this we wind up this session, and next Monday we meet again, and I will take up another 17 buildings, and all the 3 sessions put together, I would be able to complete the discussion of 50 most important buildings across the world, including India. So my request is, already the point has been made very nicely, and I would like to repeat this point once again. Please look up to the Google, get some data, additional data about all these buildings, but and firm up and be convinced about the answers, why they are correct, and then that way you will have a better grip. So please do the homework, and we will meet next Monday. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Anantha Krishna. It was a pleasure listening to your lecture. Very neatly, very detailedly explained, and it's a very valuable session. Thank you so much, sir. And
thank you very much, sir, for this opportunity given to me.
Right. So we would be having 2 more sessions with Dr. Anantha Krishna.
Yes, sir.
Right. So all the other buildings which are not covered in this session will also be covered in the other sessions. Okay.
Yes, sir.
And as Professor has told all the students, please, I hope you all have noted down not just the right answers but all the terms. Okay, so please Google them. And on DQ Edge, we also have got a wide array of building elements and etc. So please go through them, refer them as well. It will be of great use for you for the NATA, for cracking the NATA exam. All right. With that, I would like to conclude, and thank you so much for all of you for your patient attention. And I would like to thank NITTE also for providing us Dr. Anantha Krishna. And thanks to Gayatri, Dr. Gayatri as well. Thank you all so much, and looking forward to meet all of you next Monday, 12 p.m. to 2 p.m.
Sir, thanks to Raksha Kiran, who provided all the necessary support in making this presentation possible.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Raksha Kiran.
She is an assistant professor at NITTE. Sir.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Assistant Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.